بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Tonight we take our third class on the heart. Many of the questions that were asked last time on paper were about how to purify the heart. And one of the reasons why we study what we're studying is to learn how to do exactly that. To purify the heart, you have to know what it is. You have to know how it is structured. You have to know what affects it. So all of these lessons that we're taking are preparations for understanding how to purify the heart. And tonight, some of the things that we'll get into will be even more clear in that regard. So let's review a little bit, especially for those who are coming for the first time. We have spoken about how absolutely important the heart is, that it is the foundation of the deen, and to be concerned about the heart is not Sufism, it is not spirituality, it is the actual deen itself. It is the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of all the prophets before him, and of the companions. To know yourself is to know your heart. To know your heart is to know yourself. And when you know yourself, then you know the world you perceive. Then you know the reality that is around you. And then you can know God as well. So these things go together. To be ignorant of the heart is to be ignorant of yourself. And when we are ignorant of ourselves, then we are also ignorant of our hearts. We are heart creatures. We are creatures in which the heart is everything. It is at the center and the essence of what we are. To realize that treasure which is in the heart is to realize our best natures, our fundamental natures. To develop the heart to the fullest extent that we can do that, that is to become not only human, but humane, and to become noble. This is why we were created, to master the heart and to develop it. One of the things that we talk about in Islam is the perfect human being. And we have discourse in Islamic history about al-insan al-kamil, the perfect human being. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the fullest example of that, the most perfect of all things that God created. Humanism is, as all of you know, one of the most cherished of all Western values. And Westerners pride themselves in their humanistic tradition. Where did they get that? Of course, they get it from the Greeks and the Romans. They get it from their particular understanding of Jesus Christ, peace be upon him. But also it's very important that they were very influenced in the development of humanism by us. And we don't say that, I don't say that out of triumphalism or out of ignorance either. This is a reality. And these are extremely important realities in our day. Today we have people like the people running for the Republican Party in the United States, whose names I don't like to mention. But they portray Islam especially the two leading ones, in the most distorted fashion possible. And they present Islam as if it were worse than satanic. The reality is, though, that the West gets its scholarship, its scholasticism, its PhD degree, its university system, the thesis, academic freedom, all of that they get from us. And the book that you can read about that, if you're interested, is what book? Do any of you remember? This is important. I want you to remember this. Leela, do you remember? George Maqdisi. And what is the book, Fatima? The Rise of Colleges. Okay, The Rise of Colleges. This is an extremely valuable academic study of how our educational system pollinated the educational system of the West and created the university and the PhD and the dissertation. It's extremely valuable. But humanism, this essential value of Western civilization, that also comes from us. At least we have a big role that we play in that. And here, the book that you should know and you should read and you should have it in your library is also George Maqdisi, The Rise of Humanism, an extremely academic study, footnotes, references, everything. And he shows that in the Renaissance, the idea of humanism as it developed by leading Renaissance figures, Pico della Mirandola, for example, comes directly out of us. Pico says in his manifesto of the Renaissance, man is the measure of all things. Typical Renaissance language. As I was taught by Abd-Allah the Saracen. As I was taught by Abdullah the Saracen. What's a Saracen? I noticed that you shook your head. What's a Saracen? An Arab. The Saracen is an Arab. The Moor is a Berber. That's usually the division. So who was Abdullah the Saracen? We presume it is Abdullah ibn Qutayba. Okay, so this is really valuable. But humanism as it develops in the Western world, and we're not here to talk about that tonight. We have other stuff to talk about. But humanism as it develops in the Western world, it becomes a secular humanism. And even in the Italian Renaissance, you can see how the nature of man is lowered to the lowest common denominator. Machiavelli, the prince, was a humanist. Did you know that? That Machiavelli is regarded as one of the leading humanists. And yet he will use his humanism to give us a very base, but a very practical, although cynical, portrayal of the political world and how to manipulate it. So in the West, humanism becomes profane. And we could talk about that at great length. It's not what we want to talk about tonight. But we could see how, as modernism developed, especially in the last 50 years, it has become more and more profane. What I want to talk about here for a minute as we continue into the lesson is that because of the nature of the heart and the fact that the heart is the essence of you and everything good about you, we had different kinds of humanisms in Islam, like that of Abdullah ibn Qutayba, for example. But we also have transcendental humanism. And this is a word I love very much. That we are transcendental humanists. Why? Because our humanism is to develop the transcendental heart. The heart which is metaphysical. The heart which is pure. The heart which is beautiful. And the heart which is creative to degrees that you cannot imagine and I cannot imagine. So this is all what the heart is about. Transcendental humanism, the highest form of humanism that is thinkable. Our reality, what being human is truly about, and that's humanism. All of this is about what you do with that lordly, spiritual dimension that has been entrusted to you. And that lordly, spiritual dimension is what? Your heart. Al-Latifa, Al-Alima, Al-Rabbaniya, Al-Ruhaniya. This is your heart. What do you do with that? And as you develop that, you become absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. You become transformed. And then you become a transformer. So the heart is the seat of true knowledge. This is very important. And we are people who believe that the human being is gifted with the capacity to know reality as it is. I can know this bush. I can know this flower. I can know myself. I can know you, and you can know me. There's no doubt about that. This is the way God created the world, and this is, again, a radical difference between us and between the anti-traditional society that we live in the world today, when no one knows anything for sure. Even Descartes, who is a good man and a brilliant man, and he believed in God, but Descartes, at the end of his life, did not know for sure if the world existed. Is that intellect? Is that brilliance? No, I'm sorry, it's not. Don't be confused. Je pense, donc je suis. It sounds so great, right? But it's not. It is a fallacy. It is one of the biggest intellectual mistakes thinkable. And at the end of his life, Descartes doesn't really know if that world out there exists. And the way that he resolves that is by saying that I do believe in God. And I do believe that God is merciful. And I do believe that a merciful God would not deceive me. But that's nothing. That's not a proof. That is not cogent. So you have the ability to know reality as it is. This is your greatest gift. There is no bifurcation. There is no Cartesian dualism between subject and object. You know about that, and we talked about that. This is the dilemma of the West, even to this day. Cartesian dualism. That I don't know if the red apple exists, as we said last time. Modern physics does not believe in red apples. They do know that they buy something at the store that is a red apple, and they eat it and they like it. But does it exist in the external world as a red apple, or is that a construct of my mind? Does it exist in the third dimension, or do I make the third dimension? This is insanity. And again, we're not here to talk about this, but we could discuss this in great detail and show where they went wrong, and this is important. This is fallacious. So you have the capacity of real knowledge, And may Allah enable us to do that. And the heart is the seat where that knowledge takes place. And it is also the vehicle that produces that knowledge. So we are created for our heart's sake. We are created for the sake of our heart. And may we do something about that. بإذن الله تعالى. We are created, therefore, for true knowledge, to repeat what I was saying. And we are created to act on the basis of that knowledge. And this is our khususiyya. This is our special distinction as human beings. Also, we are natural lovers of knowledge. You must love knowledge. You show that you love knowledge. But human beings that do not love knowledge, and you may know some like that as well, what can we say about them? We can say that their hearts are sick. Their hearts are sick. And it doesn't matter what social class they come from. It doesn't matter what educational opportunities they had in life or didn't have. That when the heart is sound, it wants to learn. Again, we can look at the example of Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik, that once he gets serious about the truth, as he did in prison, and he gets the veils cast off of himself, what does Malcolm begin to do? He begins to study, day and night. What was the first book that Malcolm read from cover to cover? The dictionary. He read the whole dictionary, and he memorized a big part of it. And of course he tells us in his story of his life that he remembers the word aardvark, because that's the first word in the dictionary. A-A-R-D-V-A-R-K, which is a type of anteater. Aardvark. So that's the first word he learned, and he never forgot it. But this is also why Malcolm becomes so absolutely powerful, because he has control over the cognitive frames of language as based in his language. And then he reads everything voraciously, even at night when they turn off the lights in the prison, because he was in prison when he became a Muslim. He will still use a flashlight or something else to try to keep studying. What is that? Malcolm is extremely intelligent. Show me anyone who's his equal. I don't know anyone who's equal. Malcolm is extremely intelligent, but his love of knowledge means his heart is awake. His heart is alive. And this is what happens to all people who have witnessed the rebirth of their heart. Then they love knowledge, because that's what the heart needs. The heart is nourished by knowledge. The heart has to have knowledge. MashaAllah, tabarakallah, marhaban bikum, alfa marhaban. MashaAllah. This is one of the lights of Chicago who just walked into Cairo. MashaAllah. We're honored to have you here. And I see another Chicago light back there. Isn't it Nuruddin? That's right. He's Nuru Chicago. MashaAllah. Barakallahu fikum. So, this is the disposition of the heart. Now, what we want to talk about tonight, and I think I'm going to cut out some of this. I've already talked too much anyway. Is how the heart knows what it knows. Or maybe, to put it negatively, how can the heart not know what it ought to know? So we want to focus on that tonight, bi'ithnillahi ta'ala. Imam Ghazali talks about getting your heart right so that you take the sword in hand. And he means by that, your heart is this sword, which is the sword of knowledge. And you have to take it in hand, and you have to use it to get knowledge and to cultivate knowledge. And so the act of knowing and the act of seeking knowledge, this is one of the greatest things we do. And he emphasizes that every single human heart is capable of knowledge by its fitra. Of course, there are human beings who have been impaired, and those people may not be mukallaf. So we're not talking about that. But any human being who is mukallaf, who is morally responsible, before God, because you've got a functional heart, a functional intellect, then they are also capable of knowing. Every heart, al-Ghazali says, is a lordly element. Unsurun Rabbani. It is a lordly element. And essentially different in that regard from everything else. Because you are the daughter of Adam. I am the son of Adam. And Adam is special. And of course the angels are pure intellect. And the jinn also have intellect. But you, as the son of Adam, are the perfect combination. You contain every combination. You contain everything. And therefore, what is, mashallah, marhaban biki, another Chicago light, mashallah, because of this combination, you have the ability to do what no one else can do. This is also why you can know the world outside of you. And there's no question about the authenticity of that knowledge that you can gain and that you can cultivate. And this is, Imam al-Ghazali tells us, at the very essence of the amana, the trust, the amana that God gave to us. إِنَّا عَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ فأبين أن يحملنها وأشفقن منها وحملها الإنسان. So Allah says, as you all know, that we offered the amana to the heavens and to the earth and to the mountains, but they refused to take it, and they were fearful of it. They had anxiety about that, but we didn't. We carried it. Of course, we're not always very wise. But the thing is that we do have the ability to carry that amana. Otherwise, Allah would not have given it to us. So Imam al-Ghazali shows us that this verse indicates that you and all other human beings, male and female, have a distinctive quality, a particular gift that makes you fundamentally different from the heavens, the earth, the mountains, the jinn, the angels, and everything else. And it makes it possible for you to bear the amana of tawheed and ma'rifah. You can carry that amana. And of course, to the degree that we strive to do that and succeed, then we become the best of creation also. And to the degree that we become heedless of that and turn our backs on it, then we become the lowest of the low. This is very important because there is a symbiotic relationship between you and the world. You can know that world. Why can you know that world? Because you have a kinship relation with it. You are related to the pine tree. You are related to the wolf. You are related to the northern lights. You are related to the palm tree and everything here. There is no dichotomy. You are the little world, the microcosm, al-alam al-saghir. And that is the big world, the macrocosm. And you are the blueprint of that world. And it is the blueprint of you. And this is what we believe in our metaphysics of Islam. And this is a standard traditional belief. You can find it among the First Nations of the Americas. You can find it among other people. But this is very important because that is the alternative that is correct to the fallacy of bifurcation, that reduces all reality to this pitiful assertion of subject-object, nothing more. And the subject is distinctive because it can have cognition. Give me a break. That's all that's there. And it's not even certain of its cognition. And the object is significant because it's an extension in space. This is where Descartes begins. And this is one of the greatest mistakes in human intellectual history. So know that. And I hope you'll believe it's true. And if you won't, I hope you'll discover that it's true. This is very, very important. So you have this amana because you are worthy of this amana. And when you get yourself right, and you get yourself, your heart right, and you fill your heart with light and purity, then you affect the constellations. You affect the sea. You affect the whales of the sea. You affect the seasons and the birds. The world today is all falling apart, isn't it? The seas are polluted. The air is polluted. The buildings are polluted. And why? Because the hearts are polluted. And of course, that's not to deny that there are industrial and other reasons for that. And inshallah, we can take care of that. We should. But it is the destruction and the pollution of the human being that is at the essence of that. And if we don't understand that and we don't deal with that, then do you think that we will ever be able to save the Amazon? Or, to save the animals? Or to set the world right? It doesn't work like that. We have to understand how reality is created, how reality is put together. كل مولود يولد على الفطرة. All children born are born according to the fitra, which is the natural way that God created every man and woman. Every one of them, whether they're Chinese, whether they are African, whether they are Argentinian, whatever they may be, they're all created with that gift. God created the world in a beautiful way. The Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a hadith Qudsi, a sacred hadith, the word of God in a hadith, muttafaq alayh, Bukhari and Muslim, وَإِنِّي خَلَقْتُ عِبَادِي حُنَفَاءَ كُلَّهُمْ. Verily, truly, I created all of my servants. Hunafa. Hanif. What does Hanif mean? The Arabic words are very beautiful because they have extremely concrete meanings. What does Hanif mean? Do you know, Nohan? So the Hanif is the one who will always gravitate from falsehood to truth. Do you remember what a gyroscope is? Because you don't live in my world. I was born a long time ago. And one of our favorite Christmas gifts was a gyroscope. And the gyroscope, you get it going, and if you turn it on its side, it will always stand up. And they used to use them in airplanes and other things, right? So that they could balance and they could fly properly. Gyroscopes. You don't even know what a typewriter is, do you? And I wrote my dissertation on a typewriter. And now, if I only had it, I could probably sell it for a couple of $1,000s. But the gyroscope will always stand back up. So that's the Hanif. The Hanif is the one. Malcolm is a Hanif. He went astray. When he went into prison, they called him Satan, and he was happy to be called Satan. But then the gyroscope came back up, and he became something else, something truly remarkable. Okay, so that's the Hanif. And Abraham is called a Hanif. And all people who love the truth and who gravitate to the truth, they're Hanif. And the opposite of Hanif is what? Fasiq. Fasiq. And the Fasiq is a corrupt person. But the basic meaning of Fasiq or Fasaqa is that they deviate. They deviate from the truth to falsehood, which is not good. But some people are, unfortunately, that way. You can give them everything, you can teach them everything, and they will always fall down. They will always mess up. May God protect us from that. May God protect our children from that. So I created all of my servants hunafa, not fasiqun. I created all of them hunafa. وَإِنَّهُمْ أَتَتْهُمْ الشَّيَاطِينُ فَاجْتَلَتْهُمْ عَنْ دِينِهِمْ. So the Prophet said, but then the demonic beings came to them and اجتلتهم أي صرفتهم, and diverted them from their deen being deen al-fitra, the deen of the fitra. So now we want to talk about how does the heart then do this miracle? What is required of it in order to fulfill this amana? And Imam al-Ghazali is going to focus on 5 essentials. So we'll try to get those 5 essentials bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. The first one is that the heart, and you know the heart is also the intellect, the heart is also the nafs, the soul, and the heart is also the spirit. But that thing we call the heart, it's got to be adequately developed. And that means, for example, that if it is not adequately developed, if it's lacking in certain ways, then it can't do its work. And this means, for example, that people who are impaired and therefore not mukallaf, you don't expect their hearts to do what your heart can do. And God will be merciful to them because they were deprived of the very essential thing needed to do the amana. They can't do it. They cannot understand what you understand. So you have to be merciful to them as you are. The heart has to have full development. And if the development is imperfect, then it won't be able to do that. A minor child is an example of that as well. And we believe that all children are awliya. One of the reasons why they are awliya is because they're not mukallaf. They're not morally responsible. Because they will pull each other's hair and they'll break toys and they will scream and they will do all kinds of things. But they're not evil. And it's very important never to forget that, because sometimes parents, when they are tired or angry, they look on their children as if their children were actually evil in what they're doing. But that's not the case. They're not that way. They're very honest. They're very truthful. They are difficult, but they're not mukallaf. So they are awliya. They begin with the fitra, and they live in that fitra until the time that the intellect and maturity begin to come. They cannot use those tools of intellect and maturity before that time the way they will use them afterwards. But once that begins to develop, then also they move out of that wilaya. And now their passions develop, their anger develops even more, and now they are going to be tested as you and I are tested. So the heart has to be adequately developed. And therefore people who are afflicted with insanity, may God protect us from that. They also are people who don't have the adequate facility. And therefore they won't be judged the way that you who are sane will be judged. And there are other examples that you could think of the heart that is not adequately developed. One of the things I think that we have to ask about here is the role of modern technology, especially video games and these other things which often preoccupy our children completely. So that you come home or you go visit your grandchildren, and if the mother doesn't tell the child, put down your video game and go give a greeting to your grandmother or grandfather, they won't even do it. They won't even take their eyes off of that. They won't even look up at you. So what is that doing to them? What is that doing to their hearts? This is a very important question. How did you become socialized? Because you are socialized. How did you become a human being? Wasn't it by looking at your mother and your mother looking at you? Wasn't it by keeping the company of other people that you had a very powerful social relationship with? You were socialized by these people. This is a type of essential suhbah, essential socialization. So this is what is happening today, is that this technology is destroying the very reality of socialization. And that affects the heart. In fact, we even know that when we want to create armies that can do unspeakable things, One of the best ways to do that is video games. And a lot of the brutal video games that are there to purchase were developed actually to train soldiers who were expected to do things that an ordinary human being wouldn't be able to do. So this technology has the ability to de-socialize, and that's very important. Number 2 is that the heart has to fulfill the moral imperative. The heart has to live according to its moral imperative. And we spoke yesterday a little bit about intellect. And one of the things that I tried to emphasize when we spoke about intellect is that intellect has to be virtuous. In Islam, we do not conceive of intelligence that lacks virtue. There is intelligence that does lack virtue. There is the intelligence of a mafioso, or a drug lord, or of others who can do all kinds of conniving things. And that is intelligence, and it is a function of the intellect. But we don't call that intellect. The intellect cannot be intellect unless it is virtuous, and unless it actually does what it knows to be correct. And the Prophet said, we said yesterday, La amal bila ilm. There is no valid practice without knowledge. Wala ilma bila amal. And there is no knowledge without practice. That we have got to do what we know to be right. Otherwise, it becomes something else. And the Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Man amila bima alima, awrathahu Allahu ilma ma lam yakun ya'lam. That whoever puts into practice what he knows, God will give him as an inheritance the knowledge of what he did not know. There's another version of this transmission which I have here and which I like because it's more extensive. Man amila bima alima warathahu Allahu ilma ma lam ya'lam wa waffaqahu fima ya'mal hatta yastawjib al-jannah. I love that transmission. That whoever will practice what he knows or she knows, God will give them as an inheritance the knowledge of what they did not know. So how do you learn? You cannot learn if you don't practice what you did learn. That's the key to learning. And just to memorize more while we haven't practiced it, well, people will be impressed by how much you can say and how beautiful your expressions are. But it's not really knowledge. And this is a big problem. كل كلام يخرج وعليه كسوة القلب الذي منه خرج. Who said that? He's from Cairo. And he's from Egypt. Who is that? Ibn Abd-Allah. كل كلام يخرج وعليه كسوة القلب الذي منه خرج. All speech comes out of the heart, bearing the kiswa, the beautiful drapery of the heart from which it came. Okay, that's the way that the heart is. And that's why when you learn and you practice what you know, your speech comes out with a beautiful drapery. And that drapery is what dazzles the people, not the words. And someone else could say the same words, but maybe there's no drapery. Because they didn't practice what they know. They didn't practice. This is very important. This is existential. This is ontological. Man amila bima alima warathahu Allahu ilma ma lam ya'lam wa waffaqahu fima ya'mal. And God gives him tawfiq, or her. God gives them ultimate success and facilitation in what they do. حتى يستوجب الجنة, until they earn the garden. That's really beautiful. That's really beautiful. That should be written in gold. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَعْمَلْ بما يعلم تاه فيما يعلم ولم يوفق فيما يعمل حتى يستوجب النار. So whoever does not practice what they know, and we could say in English, what they know to be true, تاه فيما يعلم, will be, what do we say, lost, will be confused, will be wandering about, like a person that lost their bearings. They will lose their bearings in what they know. وَلَمْ يُوَفَّقْ فِي مَا يَعْمَلْ, and they will not be given tawfiq in the work they do, حَتَّى يَسْتَوْجِبَ النَّارِ, so that ultimately they earn the fire. God protect us from these things. And this is why, especially you as a teacher, you've got to always make sure that you are practicing what you teach. And then your students will be elevated. Your students will be affected by that. And God protect all of us from talking about the things that we do not do. Because that is cynical. And that breeds cynicism in the hearts. And there are people who are extremely knowledgeable. I remember, in 1975, I was invited to a remarkable conference, actually, of fuqaha. And there were Moroccan fuqaha, there were Egyptian fuqaha, there were Tunisian fuqaha, there were fuqaha from all over, and they were really amazing to me. And one of them was from Nigeria. He became a teacher of mine. His name was Muhammad Mukhtar al-Kishnawi. And I was working on my dissertation, which was on Maliki fiqh, and especially on amal. And I had like 150 questions. And I sat down with Kishnawi and he answered every one. Every one. He gave me hours and hours and hours. Basically, he gave me my dissertation. When I went home, I knew I'll get a PhD. Right? And then there was another scholar there who was also a Maliki. And I won't say what country he was from. But he was proud. He was very proud. And he couldn't give me more than a minute. And I went to him and I wanted to ask him questions, but he didn't have time. And I said, well, I did, speak with Al-Kishnawi about this. He said, Laysa bi shay. He's nothing. Laysa bi shay. He's nothing. He's nothing. He sat with me for hours. He answered every question that I asked. And he answered questions that nobody else ever answered. Laysa bi shay. Okay, but the thing about Kishnawi, whom I came to know and study with, is that he practiced what he taught. That was his secret. And he was a humble man. So God enable us to do that. God enable us to do that bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. So the second thing then about the heart is that the heart incapacitates itself through immorality. And it capacitates itself through virtue. Virtue. Beauty is the splendor of truth. Beauty is the splendor of truth. Ugliness is the brand of evil. Beauty is the splendor of truth. This is the universal routing of beauty in creation. You have al-haq, the truth, and of course you know that one of the names of God is al-haq. He is the real. He is the ultimate reality. Do you know anything more real? Absolutely not. The world that you see, is this more real than God? No. He is the real. He is al-haq, and He is beautiful. Inna Allaha jamilun yuhibbul jamal. God is beautiful, and He loves beauty. And we understand by that, by mafhum al-mukhalafa, by understanding the contrary that's not spoken, that God does not love ugliness. And traditional Muslims did everything beautifully. They did. Isn't it true? You can even go to the museum and see it for yourself. When I was in Pakistan not long ago, I went to one of the national museums of Pakistan in Rawalpindi. It's a beautiful museum. And in it they collect all the cultures of Pakistan. Punjabi culture, Balochi culture, Pashtun culture, Christian culture, Hindu culture, everything that is there in Pakistan. Beautifully they collected it. And the woman who took us through the museum, who's a very amazing woman, she told me when we first went to the museum, this is a museum for the living, not for the dead. And I told her, I've never been introduced to a museum in a more enthusiastic and positive way. Because museums can be the death of a people. But all those cultures that were there were absolutely incredibly beautiful. Like the cultures of your own land, like the cultures of other Muslim lands, everything that we did was beautiful. The rugs we made, the houses we built, the cities we designed, the mosques we made, and everything. We were vocational societies. And we were societies of guilds. The guild was called Sinf. Everything was done by guilds, and the guilds were highly professional. These are things that it's worthy of us to study. Very important for us to study. And these are things that most of us don't know much about, if anything, anymore. But beauty is the splendor of truth. God is beautiful. God loves beauty. Al-Haq is Jameel. And Al-Haq is also Jaleel. He is also majestic. And so when you approach God, you become real. And the closer that you approach God, the more real you become. And as you become real by approaching God, then you become beautiful on the inside, right? You become beautiful on the inside. And what do we call that beauty on the inside? Virtue. Virtue. Husnul khuluq. That's what it is. You become a person who has beauty all inside of you. And once you're beautiful on the outside, everything you do will be beautiful. The way you walk will be graceful. The way you talk will be graceful. The way you deal with others will be graceful. Beauty is the splendor of truth. That's that universal routing. And therefore, you cannot have a functional heart when it is not beautiful, and when it is not virtuous, and when it is not sincere about this. That's very, very important. And for this reason also, wrong action, oppressive action, abusive action, these destroy the heart, because they don't leave any room in it for the beauty that must be an essential part of it. They get rid of that. And then the heart becomes filled with najasa. Najasa. And this najasa, as you know, is ma'nawi. It is of a abstract or moral nature. Whereas, and we carefully avoid the najasa that is of a tangible nature, right? None of us would be caught dead, with najasa on themselves or around them. We can't tolerate that. Then we tolerate najasa in the heart, like envy, jealousy, rivalry, pettiness, and so forth. So all of that has to go. That's very, very important. And again, we talked last time about the two major things that destroy the heart. And what are they? Shubuhat, fallacies, and shahawat. And here shahawat are not just appetites, but shahawat are also anger, shahwatul ghadab, anger that is out of control. So therefore, Islam removes this darkness from the heart so that it can work. And one of the beauties about this religion is that whenever a person enters it, the heart is clean. The heart is made pure. When you become a Muslim, you are born again. And we had a community in Spain back in the early 1980s. Unfortunately, it didn't last. It was destroyed by a person with an evil heart. That's the truth. But that community, when it was working, it was doing amazing things. We were getting converts every week. One week we got 18. I remember one day, I was in a madrasa. It was a beautiful Andalusian madrasa. We taught there, and we had a little window on the door. You no doubt have that in some of your old homes here. And someone knocks at the door. And the brother goes and opens it, and he shuts it right away. This was a Spanish man who was really strange. He was really frightening. He was a former communist, Stalinist, who became a Buddhist of all things. And he was living up in the mountains outside of Granada, fasting and fasting and fasting and doing his Buddhist worships as he thought they were supposed to be done. And all of his friends became Muslims. And so it's like, well, I guess I should check that out. And when he came, and he had a leather suit, that's all he had. A leather, it was almost like a wetsuit. And he came, and he was spooky. His eyes were frightening. And the brother shut the window, and he knocked again. He said, "May I come in?" And so he said, "Just wait a minute." So then they went, and they said, "There's a crazy guy at the door. Should we let him in?" And then some people said, "Well, you have to let him in." And then, "Oh my God, he wants to become a Muslim." And we said, we've got a lot of challenges in this community. And then he's going to come in. And he was really frightening, I remember. And then he embraced Islam. And it's almost like, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. What are you going to do with him? And in 2 weeks, you could not tell him anymore from the other people. He became so beautiful. Really. Believe me, his face changed. Everything changed. And one of the things about him was that he was a trained professional acrobat. And so I used to watch him. I was on the second floor. I'd watch him in the garden. He could not walk 3 steps without skipping a huge acrobatic skip. You almost expect him to flip over, And he became one of the biggest helpers in the community. Anything you needed, he would do for you. Why? Because he was dead and he was given life. And when he became a Muslim, his heart came back to him. This religion of yours is amazing. This religion of yours is amazing. Don't keep it to yourself. So shahawat, hawa, these are the things that destroy the heart. Whenever you do a sin, a dhanb, then part of your intellect is harmed. Part of your intellect is harmed, and you don't want that to be the case. As we said before, min husni islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'ni. Part of the good Islam of a person, like this one, is that he leaves aside what doesn't concern him. But he doesn't have to do that. He's still a wali of Allah. Right? Right. But part of the good Islam, of a man or a woman, is that you put aside what does not concern you. Okay? Now, when we don't put aside what does not concern us, we also destroy something in our intellect. We destroy something in our heart. So these are very important things. We've got to learn to live within the parameters. And when we do that, everything begins to get put in place. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Of course, when you do a wrong action, what should you do? Follow it up by a good one. A good one. And that yamhuhu, and that will erase it, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. So this is very, very important. And that helps to return the heart to its natural state. But again, we want to be very careful not to take one step forward and one step back. But to take one step forward, another step forward, another step forward. You want to fill your heart with virtue. You want to fill your heart with light. And you want that light to startle the world. And Imam Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili, may Allah be pleased with him, he said that if you were able to open the heart of a disobedient Muslim, it would blind the world. There is so much light in the disobedient Muslim that if somehow you were able to open their heart would blind the world. And so he says, مَا مَعْنَاهُ. So what about the obedient Muslim? And then what about you? Because you're not just an obedient Muslim. You are one that loves Allah. You are one that seeks this light. And your light is incredible. And the stronger it becomes, the more powerfully it affects everything around us. Here I want to recite this beautiful transmission of the beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma a'tini nuran wa zidni nuran waj'al li fi qalbi nuran wa fi qabri nuran wa fi sam'i nuran wa fi basari nuran. And then in one transmission, fi sha'ri nuran, we were able to go to visit these wonderful athar of Imam al-Hussein, and this is one of the Sayyidas who, sitting back here, I'm so happy you came, who helped to let us in. And there you have the sha'r of the Prophet. And one of the things that this wonderful gentleman who was there told us is that usually human hair doesn't last more than 30 years. And this is the Prophet's hair, which no one has changed for how many hundreds and hundreds of years? And yet there it is. And why? وَجَعَلْ شَعْرِي نُورًا. His hair is light. His hair is not just like the hair that we have. وَفِي بِشْرِي وَفِي لَحْمِي وَدَمِي وَفِي also عِظَامِي نُورًا. So the Prophet ﷺ is asking for nur ala nur ala nur. And that's because this is what makes you able to do the task of the human being that you were created to be. And may Allah make us like that, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. To get a bright heart, to get an illuminated heart, one that clearly reflects the truth, you must set out to obey God consistently and to turn away from everything that's wrong and from shubuhat and shahawat. May God make that easy for us. It's difficult, but in fact it becomes easy once we begin to taste that drink. So may Allah let us do that. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Okay, so this is number 2. And in this process of getting the heart right and making it virtuous, one of the most important things to be mentioned there is suhbah, company, keeping good company. And this is, in my belief and conviction, good company. There's no one here who, in my belief and conviction, is not good company. And the more that we stay together, the more that we love each other, the more that we bond with each other, the better we become. And nafsu lin-nafsi li-tasrib. The soul steals for itself. From whom? From you. You have qualities I don't have. So my nafs will pick your pocket. And that's halal. Because it's ma'nawi, ghayru mahsus. You have qualities I don't have. How nice it would be if I had those qualities. So we take from each other. This is the gift of suhbah. This is the gift of suhbah. Number 3, you've got to look at the right things. You've got to be interested in the right things if you want the heart to work. And therefore, one of the things that makes the heart dysfunctional is looking at the wrong things. Your heart was created to know God. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. So you were created for ma'rifah. Ibn Abbas says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْرِفُونَ. I did not create the jinn and the human beings, but that they know me. So why did Allah say يَعْبُدُونَ? Because He al-wasila. Because the way to get to that knowledge is ibadah, humility, and service to God, not philosophy. And philosophy has its role, but that's not how we know our Lord. We know Him through ibadah. So we have to look at the right things. We have to put the right things in front of the heart. And this is very, very important. Imam al-Ghazali talks about the fact that often we put in front of our hearts things that are really not of much value. And again, because your heart was created to know God, and your heart has the capacity to know the absolute, al-haq, and to know the infinite, then also your heart has the tendency to attach to anything it attaches to with absolute love, with infinite love. And we can have that feeling for a car, for a palace, for a career, for money, for gold, and for many things. Because this is the nature of your heart. This is why you must break all the idols. And the idol that people used to worship outwardly, they attach to that with a love which is like the love of God, because their hearts were made that way. That's why this is such a big sin. But that idol is easy to break. But this idol that I create in my heart, it's not. My image of myself, the career, the money, success, these are big things, aren't they? You're successful. And could you ever fail? I remember myself, before I was a Muslim, one of the things I think I had to do to become psychologically strong was to say that you can fail and still live. And the way that I was brought up, that's not the way it was. You've got to be the best in everything you do. You cannot fail. You cannot fail. And that became unbearable for me. But what if I do fail? And so therefore, around in the 1960s, this is part of that 1960s thing, that I just said that, I can fail. And I can still live. And I don't have to succeed according to your standards. Okay? But the thing is, when we become attached to these things, then they become blocks. They become very big blocks. So for that reason, Imam al-Ghazali tells us that we have to be very careful about the things we love. I remember when I was in 4th grade, forgive me all these, side statements, but, we moved from Nebraska, where I was born, and we went to the University of Georgia, where my father and mother would teach. And the first day I went to school, this boy came up to me, I still remember his name, Billy Carlton, and he was fat, and nobody liked him. I did like him. And so he said, you came from Nebraska, right? And he said, where'd you come from? I said, Albion. He said, that's a small town? I said, yeah. He said, could you give me your phone books? And so I gave him 3 phone books. They were small phone books. You wouldn't believe how small they were. But they still had a lot of numbers. The next day he came to school, and he said, here are your phone books. Ask me any name in the phone book. So I said, Mr. Berthelsen. And he gave me the phone number. He memorized all the phone numbers in one night. But and his heart was in love with that kind of thing. But that's a very good example of putting the wrong thing in front of the heart. People who, in my country, some people like baseball. I used to be like that. Baseball statistics, everybody knows them, right? Certain people. It's like, okay, it's cool. Baseball is fun to play, but do we really have to devote our lives to memorizing the batting averages and everything else. So what do you put in front of your heart? And those examples are trivial. But career, wealth, business, things like this, these are not trivial. And most people are continually putting in front of their hearts things that their hearts were not made to love with that absolute love of God. And so therefore we have to get it right. And therefore we have to make sure that we get out of the attachments of the heart, things like the shahawat, things like the shubuhat, things like the ladhat of this world, all of those enticements of the world. And Imam al-Ghazali says, you have to put before your heart the realities of hadratul rububiyyah, the presence of the lordship of God. And he says, al-haqa'iq al-ilahiyya, the realities of the divine. And he says, al-haqiqatul matluba, the reality that is actually desirable and desired. This is what you want to go before your heart. Is 1 hour up? Okay, thank you for telling me. I have to speed it up a little bit here. Okay, so this is very, very important. And again, shubuhat, we have to talk about this. Shubuhat are very important. And we talked a little bit about shubuhat. But, and you talk about the attachment of people to shubuhat. Intelligent design. Do you know what that is? Intelligent design. If I had access to the internet and we had time, I could show you a beautiful thing on YouTube called Nature by Numbers. And it's a beautiful production by a Spaniard. And it's about what? The golden section. And what do we call those numbers? The Fibonacci. What do we call them?
Fibonacci.
Fibonacci? Is that right? Fibonacci numbers? Is that the right pronunciation? Fibonacci is one of the first great mathematicians of Europe. He lived in the Middle Ages. And he worked out the numbers. Okay, and the numbers are what? 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so forth. This is the golden section. The golden section. And the golden section goes through all creation. It's in your DNA. It is in the structure of your body, the relationship of the different proportions of your body to each other. It's in the tooth, the beautiful tooth, and everything that we have. It is there in the nautilus, and in fact in this beautiful video, I wish I could show it to you, maybe we'll do that. In this beautiful video, it shows, it maps out the nautilus, 0, 1, 1, 2, 5, 8, 13. It just shows the nautilus shell being created, and then all the other parts of it, and there's the nautilus that lives deep in the sea, your brother, your sister. And then it goes from that to the sunflower. Even if you look at flowers, you'll find that the petals on them are often according to these numbers. There are 3 petals on a clover. A 4-leaf clover may be lucky. That's because it doesn't hardly exist. Most clovers are 3, and then 5, and then 8. These are the numbers on flowers. So this is intelligent design. It goes through all creation. There it is in you. The way you're made. Can't we see that? And if you study this literature, the literature that denies intelligent design, you may be amazed at the intensity with which so-called scientists refuse to acknowledge intelligent design. And this is because of the fallacy of what? Closed system universe. This is one of the biggest shubuhat of our age. The closed system universe. What is a closed system universe? It's the belief that the universe is a closed system. And there's nothing in that system but what? Matter and energy. And all that happens in it is either random chance, which I could show you does not exist, or it is natural law. And natural laws are not laws anyway. That's another fallacy. They're not laws. They are psychological generalizations that human beings make, and scientists admit that. Einstein admits that. Others admit that. They're not laws. We call them that, but that is a misnomer. They are generalizations of expectations that we have about reality because of the way it works. Okay, so again, the heart, if it attaches to these things, then it will not budge, and it cannot understand. And I've studied this argument over intelligent design, and I've taught that at the university level. And it is amazing. And the students, and we give them readings, and the students are amazed at the obstinance of the deniers of intelligent design. Absolutely, they will not budge on that. And the closed system universe does not work, by the way. It doesn't work at all. Because first of all, it doesn't have enough matter in it to do what they expect it to have done, what they call Big Bang. And it lacks over 90% of the matter that it needs. But no problem, we'll create dark matter that nobody ever saw, that does not obey magnetic fields. And we'll even say that 2/3 of that is hot and the other third is cold. I mean, why don't you just talk about Allah? Right? So this is very important. You've got to look at the right things, and you've got to attach to the right things. And again, when you see the obstinance of people who attach to these ideas, then it reminds me always of idolatry. This is the way the idolaters were too. They did not budge. They would not budge. Number 4, we must make sure that there is no veil between the mirror of your heart and al-haqiqat al-matluba, and the desired reality, the desired haqiqah. And this one is the most difficult. The ones before that are sort of ones that you can easily say, well, I'm not going to do that, but this one's more difficult. And this means that even when your heart is sound, even when your heart is virtuous, even when you're looking at the right thing, there are other veils that can intervene. And you must make sure that you get rid of those veils. Okay, what do we mean by that? And this means that a person may be veiled by prejudice. A person may be veiled by fanaticism. A person may be veiled by their prior commitment to other things. And we believe in the validity of all the madhabs. Right? I happen to be a Maliki. You don't have to be. If you're a Shafi'i or a Hanafi or a Hanbali, marhaban. I wish I could be them all, to tell you the truth. When I go to Malaysia, I want to be a Shafi'i. And, when I go to Tarim, I want to be a Shafi'i. And when I go to Turkey and Pakistan, I pray like a Hanafi. And I wish I knew all the things I need to be a Hanafi. Because, that's the way they are. I'm not going to, I want to be like them. And I respect their school. Okay, but some people are not that way. I know Malikis, some of whom were teachers, or teachers of teachers, or students of teachers, who basically, that's the only school going. And I know Shafi'is who have a similar opinion. And I know Hanafis who really have that down. It's like, there's nothing else on the face of the earth, sorry, but that is the truth. You're welcomed here in Turkey. Or in Pakistan, but in reality, you did miss the boat, but you can be here with us. We love you. Okay, so, but you have to be really careful about that, because this commitment to your school, this commitment to your doctrine, this commitment to your interpretation, it may be correct, but it becomes one of the biggest veils of all. And this is one of the most difficult. And therefore, the removing of all the prejudice, of all the prior commitments, of everything that makes us look down on other valid opinions and other possibilities, this has got to go. And our religion was created in such a way that it gave us all we need to avoid this. Madhab, for example. Whose madhab is it to pray 5 times a day? Whose madhab is it to fast in the month of Ramadan? Nobody's madhab. Nobody's. You don't call that madhab, because that is qat'i. That is definitive in the Quran and the Sunnah. So it's not Hanafi madhab, it's not Maliki madhab, it's not Shafi'i madhab, it's not Hanbali. Madhab can only be in dhanniyat. And by the wisdom of God, most of fiqh is dhanni. Most of it is dhanniyat. Every faqih knows that. Every usuli knows that. And therefore Imam al-Shafi'i has a brilliant methodology for dhanniyat. And Imam Malik has a different brilliant methodology for dhanniyat. And Abu Hanifa has a different brilliant analogy for dhanniyat. And Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal has a different methodology. All of them are different. None of them are the same. And all of them are ijtihads about how do we work with the dhanniyat. And therefore they also understood that we respect the opinions of the other schools. And Imam Abu Hanifa used to come to Medina and sit with Imam Malik. And they would talk about khilaf. And after he died, his son Hamad would come and sit with Imam Malik and tell him about Abu Hanifa. And Imam Malik yearned for that knowledge. And one of the basic principles of Imam Malik was ri'ayatul khilaf, the heeding of dissent. Meaning that if Imam Malik takes a position, for example, in marriage, that a particular type of marriage is invalid, and therefore there's no dowry in it, or there is no inheritance in it. Okay, it's mafsukh. Okay, yet he knows that it's not mansukh with Abu Hanifa. He will say, then she will have a dowry, she will have inheritance, even though he will null it. But if the husband should die during the waiting period, she will inherit from him. Okay, why? Ri'ayatul khilaf, out of respect for Abu Hanifa. This is our civilization. And where is that today? And you see, most of the things that we fight about among ourselves as Muslims, most bitterly, are dhanniyat. Sometimes they don't even rank there, because sometimes they're just false. But we will fight over them. So again, be careful of what you attach to. And again, illusions, delusions, false cognitive frames, all of these come between you and the haqiqa matluba. Idolatry, polytheism, communism, fascism, nationalism, atheism. I used to be, and I shouldn't probably say this, I should be more wise and stop saying it. I used to be a communist. I was a socialist. And I knew it down. I knew it very well. And I did believe in that. This was the 1960s. And again, I know that offends some people, especially in my own country. They know that, you see, he's a communist, he's a socialist. We were actually proud of that, me and my friends. But again, we lived in a different world altogether, the materialist world. And, you know, your heart cannot function in that world the way it will function if you lift those cognitive frames and substitute for them something better. And that was also part of the great gift of Islam, that now you have cognitive frames that make things clear that were not clear before. So these are again things that blind the heart. And that heart might be virtuous. Maybe what you seek to do is a good thing, but nevertheless the heart is blinded by that. Ta'assub, being fanatically attached to ideas, even when those ideas are true. Some of these ideas are false, but they're not all false. Okay, so then we come here to you know, the last of these 5 prerequisites. And again, this is about purification of the heart. because all of these 5 things have to be there if the heart is to be pure, right? So, and this is that sometimes the heart cannot work on the basis of what it's got naturally. It's got to have additional help. And here Imam al-Ghazali uses the image of the mirror. And often he uses the image of the mirror for the heart, because your heart mirrors to you the world out there, and it understands it. And it mirrors to you the world in here, and you understand it. But I can see my face in the mirror. You can see your face in the mirror. Can you see the back of your neck in the mirror? No. So in order to do that, what do you need? Another mirror. Okay, so this is a beautiful metaphor. And what he means by that is that sometimes the heart cannot work until you get other prerequisites, that enable you to understand things that otherwise are not easy to understand. Let's see if we can get some examples of that. For example, one of the things I like to teach, maybe I can show our brother Lee this before we leave, is about Muslims in America before Columbus. Usually when I teach that, I put Muslims in America before Columbus, question mark. Okay, so that's where I'm going, but we're going to try to erase the question mark. The fact is that many people came to America by sea a long time before Columbus crossed the ocean. And that is impossible, okay, for many people to believe. And again, it's all about cognitive frames. It's about certain opinions they have of ancient people, which are not true. That ancient people didn't know anything. No, I'm sorry. In fact, Toynbee, who is one of our greatest historians, he says that the best human beings were the human beings of the Paleolithic, which is what we call the Old Stone Age. That means before, in this region, 7000 BC. He said they were the best human beings ever. And of course, immediately you've got cognitive frames sounding the burglar alarm. Thief, stop it. No. What is Toynbee basing that on? He's basing it on the universal study of micro-religion, which people call primitive religion. Okay, and there's a great study that was done of that in the 20th century by a German named Wilhelm Schmidt. 10 volumes. He studied every micro-religion he could find, and he showed that all micro-religions believe in one God. All of them. Whether they are African or Asian or American or whatever they may be. They all believe in one God. You probably weren't taught that in school, but that's the truth. And Toynbee took that really seriously, because these micro-religions, they must reflect, because they're all over the world, in Australia and elsewhere, distributed all over, they must reflect something ancient then. This must, for one way or the other, this has got to be an indication of ancient humanity. And the Greeks used to say, one tribe, one God. Wherever you find one tribe, and that's a micro-religion, a micro-society, you will find one creator God. This is amazing. So Toynbee is using that, and he's also using language. How do you think? Language. How is your language, how is your thought able to be elevated and brilliant? Language. Malcolm X, read the dictionary. Read the whole dictionary. And then he gets a language that enables his thought, to fly like a falcon. Okay, that's what he did. His name was Shabazz. Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, and Shabazz is Shahbaz. It is the royal falcon. It is, by the way, the symbol of Sheikh Abdul-Qadir al-Jilani. When we hear Shahbaz, we hear of Sheikh Abdul-Qadir al-Jilani. So Malcolm was given that name. So without language, you can't think. And this is the reason why when you want to liberate a people, you've got to teach them how to talk. And it doesn't mean that you have to teach them classical English. You could rap. But you've got to use your language in a dynamic way that takes the veils off of their eyes and enables them to see. This is a revolutionary act. You've got to restore their language to the highest level that you can. And when we look at languages among human beings, what are the most amazing and rich languages that there are? They are the most ancient languages that they are. You know Arabic. This is one of the gifts God gave you. Do you know how old Arabic is? And here I'm basing this on scientific linguistics of the Afro-Asian family to which Arabic belongs. And Arabic is older than Egyptian. Arabic is a lot older than Egyptian and Ethiopian. It is thousands of years older than Hebrew and Syriac and Aramaic. And we know this by comparative studies, because whatever we find in Egyptian, old Egyptian of the pharaohs, we will find the same thing in Arabic. And whatever we find in Hebrew or Ethiopic, we will find in Arabic. Whatever we find in Berber or Hausa, Hausa is also Afro-Asian, we will find it in Arabic. And so therefore, Arabic's got everything. And therefore we know that the Arabian Peninsula preserved it culturally and geographically for thousands of years. The way the Blessed Prophet ﷺ spoke Arabic is the way that the speakers of that language spoke it at least 10,000 years ago. Okay, and I'm not putting my neck on the line when I say that. That's based on sound comparative linguistics. And if we go to other families of languages, the older the language, the more beautiful the language. This is the rule. It's the rule with Mandinka. It's the rule of Wolof and other languages. Our Sheikh who speaks Wolof, it's not his mother language, but he learned it from Wolof Sheikhs who know the ancient Wolof. Okay, and what if you look at Indo-European languages? Is there anything equal to Sanskrit? Believe it or not. And there's one language that's very close to Sanskrit, which is Old Iranian. Old Iranian, the language of the Zend Avesta. Okay, so the more you go back in the history of language, the more incredible the language is. One of the first books I bought here in Cairo, 1973, the book fair, was Lisan al-Arab. And I still have it. And I still can't hardly read it. Every time I open it up, it's like, what word is that? And then you get the poetry of the Jahilis, and it's like, could somebody please tell me what this means? I don't know enough about camels, and I don't know enough about all these other things, but the words I never heard before in my life. Even to this day, so frustrating, so humiliating. But how rich is this language? And how rich were the people who spoke it? Because that reflects their cognitive ability. Okay, so this is important. What do you believe about ancient people? You go to Pakistan, the Indus Valley, and I told you about that incredible museum we went to, and they showed us, you have civilizations in the Indus Valley that go back 9,000 years. And in digging those up, you see that some of the women wore bracelets on their arms, their left arms, bracelets from here to here. And you can go to those villages today and they still do it 9,000 years later. Incredible continuity, right? So again, cognitive frames. How do you think of ancient people? How do you think of different people? And then also, if we want to talk about crossing the Atlantic, you have to know something about currents. That there is the equatorial current, which is powerful and comes off the coast of the Gambia and Senegal and goes straight across the Atlantic. And it will take you there if you get caught in it in 50 days. Your difficulty will be getting out of the current and not going to America. And so when we look at the most ancient Americans who lived 14,000 years ago, they're Africans. I could show you their pictures. Maybe we'll have a chance to do that. But in any case, this is another thing, that you've got to have mirrors. So for example, if I want to know about miracles, and that miracles are not irrational, Then I have to know about the nature of possible being and necessary existence. And I have to also know that natural laws are not laws. They are generalizations. They are what we call sunnatullah. They are ada. They are customary experience. Can God not break that? God who made it? Yes, of course he can. So he can do things that are miraculous. There's nothing irrational about that. But again, in order that we understand this, then certain cognitive frames have got to be taken out and others have got to be put in, and then you've got a mirror that enables you to look at the back of your head. So these are the things that Imam al-Ghazali talks about, and he says these are the 5 objectives that if you are conscious of them, now you can begin to purify your heart. Now you can purify it from the hold of shubuhat, the hold of shahawat, and all of these other things bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. You know, he or she who purifies this nafs, you know, they will succeed. And the nafs here, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا. The nafs here is the heart, the intellect, the spirit, and all of these things together. فَمَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ أَنْ يَهْدِيَهُ يَشْرَحْ صَدْرَهُ لِلْإِسْلَامِ. And so whomever God wills to guide, he will open up his heart to Islam, to submission. Thank God that he did that for us. And may he make them really open and keep them that way. أَفَمَنْ شَرَحَ اللَّهُ صَدْرَهُ لِلْإِسْلَامِ فَهُوَ عَلَى نُورٍ مِّن رَبِّهِ. Is the one whom God has opened up his heart. It's not tight anymore. It's not constricted. It's opened up. And he opened it up for Islam so that he now lives according to light and receives light from his Lord. Is he like the others? No, not at all. And may Allah fill us with this light. May he give us these gifts. And may he make us workers. We've got to work. You know, this religion is incredible. And this religion has the power to take off. Please study your history. How does Islam usually spread in history? I mean, at what proportion does it usually spread? Bell curve. This is usually what happens. The bell curve, little, little, little. And then you get somebody big and another person big, and boom, it goes up. Malcolm X is one of those. How many thousands of us owe our lives to Malcolm X? I do. I do. And I would not have been a Muslim if it weren't for Malcolm X. The fact that Islam is intellectually pleasing, that wasn't enough for me. I had to have somebody like Malcolm that I love you. I'm attached to you. You're my leader. That's the way I was, whether you believe that or not. That I was a communist. I was a socialist. I love Malcolm. You know, you say this is the way you went and this is the way we should go. I'm with you. I will do what you said. That's the way many people are. So once you get people like Muhammad Ali, you get people like Malcolm X, and of course we've got lots of people today as well, then you can expect it to take off. What are you going to do when it does take off? How are we going to take care of these people? How are you going to take care of these people? Because we have to have your help, right? What are we going to do about these people? Some Muslims went to southern Mexico, to Chiapas, which is the poorest part of Mexico, and they were giving da'wah, and guess what? The Mayan Indians overheard it. 1,000 Mayans embraced Islam. 1,000 Mayans, and you know the Mayans, they built civilization. So what do we do with them? Isn't that our responsibility? Even here in Cairo, isn't that our responsibility? Don't we care? وَمَنْ لَمْ يَهْتَمْ بِأَمْرِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ فَلَيْسَ مِنْهُمْ. Whoever doesn't care about the affair of the Muslims, he doesn't belong to them. In Cuba today, we have between 5,000 and 8,000 converts all over the islands. Who's behind that? God. In the United States, how many converts do we have? Especially in the inner city. One brother told me a long time ago, he says, in the inner city, Islam is on cruise control. So what do we do about that? What do we do? How do we educate them? How do we help them? How do we enable them to get their act together? And in South Africa today, we have maybe over 100 converts every week. And often they're coming out of churches with Bibles in their hands. And they're sitting down in halaqas that some of our brothers have put together, which, according to what I've heard, are done well. And they become Muslims right there on the spot. So what do we do about that? You know, we were in the Rihla in 2013 in Turkey, and one of our beloved brothers who might be listening, his wife is likely to be listening right now, she had a Filipina maid who, when she heard the scholars talking about the fire and the garden, that was it. She took the shahada. All these other Filipina maids in Dubai, where they live, they became Muslims, and then they were calling their family and giving them da'wah, and we were giving shahada over the phone. And I didn't know Tagalog, they don't know English, they don't know Arabic. We just had to tell the maids in Tagalog, just tell them, repeat what we say. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. Okay, so, you know, we've got a lot of work to do. And of course, we've got a lot of problems. And the problems we face today are heart-wrenching. Heart-wrenching. We can't even talk about them. I visited one of my beloved friends in Jeddah before I came here, Dr. Khaldun al-Ahdab, who is one of the most intelligent Syrians on the face of the earth. And he's a great scholar of hadith. A great scholar of hadith. Zawaid Tarikh Baghdad. And I didn't even want to talk about Syria. How can I? How can I? It aged him 50 years. I can't do that. It's not polite. In the end, he talked about it a little bit. Okay? So it's like, you know, this is the situation we live in today, and you know this. You have pain in your own heart. Who doesn't? Who doesn't? But may Allah enable us to do the right things and to get our hearts together and to begin to build and not to destroy. And then also, your religion is alive and it is spreading. Again, I'm talking and not answering questions. But, you know, most Muslims on the face of the earth today, according to some very valid studies by a scholar named Richard Bullitt, and B-U-L-L-I-E-T, Bullitt. He pronounces it Bullitt. And you should read his book, The Case for Islamo-Christian Civilization. Not a hard book to read, not very big. You should really read that book. That's another book you should have. The Case for Islamo-Christian Civilization. That's a really good book. It's a really useful book. But Bullitt's done all kinds of statistical studies of the spread of Islam. And he says that most Muslims in the world today are either converts, or they are the children of converts, or the children of the children of converts, or the children of the children of children of converts back to 5 or 6 generations. That's about most of the Muslims in the world today, in India, Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Africa, and elsewhere. This religion spreads on its own. We don't have a church. We don't have missionaries. We're not Buddhists, and we're not Catholics, and we're not Christians. And again, but you and I and us, we are the ones who are responsible for that. And inshallah, we stop here and take a question or 2 or 3. Bismillah. And I still have questions from yesterday. So this question is, what is the difference between ar-ruh and an-nafs? Also, do we control our hearts by controlling our thoughts, like promoting self-development courses in the modern world? Very good question. As you remember, even though this is not easy to understand, all of these 4 words are regarded to be somehow synonymous. that nafs, ruh, aql, and qalb ultimately mean the same thing. In the beginning, they don't seem to. In the beginning, they seem very distinctive. But at the end, they are the same. They all converge into the same reality, which is al-latifa, al-rabbaniya, al-alima, al-mudrika, which are this subtle human reality that has the gift of knowledge and perception, which is the human being and his or her highest form. And the nafs is the one that goes the whole journey. And the nafs has got to go the whole journey. So it begins in the beginning. And in the beginning, as you know, it is al-jami' lish-shahwati wal-ghadab. It is that unifying principle that brings together anger and appetite or passion. And we talked about that last time. And we also said that anger and appetite are basically good. So we're not going to try to uproot them, right? But it's got to grow. And you have nafs ammara. This is the bad one. This is the problematic one. And then that nafs ammara that commands evil, it can become nafs lawama. وَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِالنَّفْسِ اللَّوَّامَةِ. God says, I bear witness by the self-deprecating soul. The one that sits up at night and says, why did I do that? Why did I say that? When am I going to ever learn? What is wrong with me? Right? I'm not the only one that does that. Right? And that is something great. Allah makes oath by it. And the nafs lawama, you can't stay there. If you remain in the nafs lawama, you will revert to amara. And depression is an example of that. The person in severe depression is doing lawm of themselves. They're blaming themselves. They think they're worthless. But then it becomes amara, because then it's saying you are nothing. You are worth nothing. You should kill yourself. You should get rid of this life. You know, you'll never be anything. That's not lawama. That's worse than lawama. That's amara. And that's because we didn't get beyond the nafs lawama. And we fell back to the nafs amara. So you've got to keep moving. You've got to keep growing until then you get a nafs al-mutma'inna. And this is the one that's at peace with itself. And why? Because it's receiving khitab al-ruh. It is receiving the discourse, you know, the communion, we can say in English, of the Spirit. And now it's hearing beautiful things and good things. And now it's able to sort things out. And now it knows what it wants. So this is a nafs that the aql and the ruh in it are something big. And in fact, they're in charge. And then it goes up to the nafs radiya mardiya, the nafs that is pleased with God and pleasing to God. And God takes you the rest of the way. فَادْخُلِي فِي عِبَادِي. Enter now among my servants. The prophets, the messengers, the angels, the salihin, the salihat. وَادْخُلِي jannati, and come into my garden. So the nafs is able to go the whole trip. And the ruh is always there. And the qalb is always there. And the intellect is always there. But these can be captivated. These can be enchained. These can be manipulated. You know, a drug lord can't be a drug lord if he doesn't know all kinds of tricks. And if he doesn't have all kinds of intuitions. They're very dangerous people. You can't fool them. You know? And they're using their intelligence and their intuition for these things. And often they have also demonic connections. And I knew people, and some of us here know people, that have been afflicted by drugs. And this is something, may you never be afflicted by this, because you cannot trust them ever. Even if they're your own blood, you cannot trust them ever. And one of the things I noticed, I first came into contact with that in the early 1970s. And actually that was my brother. He was selling drugs, he'd go to the Caribbean, and then he became addicted to heroin. And we know who he was with. The drug people in those days were nothing compared to the people today. And my mother told me, you'll go in and get him and bring him out. And I told her, that's exactly what I'll do. And I walked into the drug house, and there he was sitting in the corner. He was spaced out. And I sat by him, and I said, I'm going to pick you up, and we're walking out of here, and we're not going back. And he went with me. And the reason why is because he had actually had something happen to him just the day before, in which he was taught that you are with Satan, and that you are at the crossroads of your life, that it's the hangman, or it's life. You either make the right decision or you're dead. And so he was ready to go. He walked out with me. And then we took him to different places. Finally, we took them to my grandfather's house. He was dead. He had died. And they surrounded our house, and I had an aunt who came out with an automatic shotgun, and she said, you clear off this property or I begin to shoot. And they cleared off the property. They didn't come back. And then we took him actually to Africa. We took him to West Africa. So drugs, you know, that's when you see that. You see the satanic. A lot of people who deal with drugs, they know that. A lot of them even get into Satan worship and things like that. So all of these faculties can be abused. All of these faculties can be misused. And we have to get them right, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. But your spirit is the highest manifestation of yourself. And your spirit is that part of you that is naturally created to receive the infinite and the absolute and to have communion with God. May Allah make us that way. How do we understand the power of music over the heart, particularly in regards to our children and modern music? This is a difficult question. It's a fifth question. I wrote in a paper called Living Islam with Purpose, and it's available on the internet. It's a little bit too long. People told me not to make it as long as I did. It should be maybe 5 papers at least. But one of the things it does talk about is about music. And the fuqaha do not have consensus on music. They have difference of opinion on music. And it's true, many of the fuqaha have a very negative view of music. And if you look at standard fiqh, I don't think you'll find anything else. But when you go to the fatwas, you do. And this is because of the fact that in Islam, we use music. Of course, we use it in weddings. We used it in war. We used it in military architecture. And we used it in other things, such as curing the insane. So music therapy is a fundamental part of Islamic history. And my opinions are not very important, certainly when it comes to fiqh. But one of the things that I believe is that music has the power to open the heart. And how do I know that? Well, probably the same way you do. That music does open the heart. And so that's what makes music very dangerous. Because once you've opened the heart, what are you going to put in it? And that's why you can open the heart to cure the insane. And you can open the heart to do other really good things. But you can also open up the heart to destroy. And so, music is very important. And music happens to be, whether the fuqaha like that or not, a fundamental part of our civilization and culture. We had it wherever we went, and we had types of it that were very highly respected, and that were known to be at the very essence of our civilization and culture. And again, what is my opinion? What value does my opinion have? And when you begin to talk like this, certain fuqaha, the red lights start going off, and different alarms, and they will send emails and do other things. So I should probably stop right here. But in any case, I do believe in the da'wah. And that, I hope, is what I really believe in and want to do. And when people live in a world that is nothing but images and nothing but music, and that's all they listen to, and even that they don't listen to forever, 3 minutes at a time. They don't have attention spans. How are you going to communicate to them? How are you going to communicate to them? You've got to be able to access their hearts. And traditionally, we did that with music. It was one of the main ways we did it. And how did Islam spread in Indonesia? You must know. What did Kali Jaga do? He's one of the great saints. Kali Jaga, who's one of the greatest saints. I love him. I love him. But he spreads Islam through Java, through puppets. Through puppets. I mean, isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? And of course he also used gamelan music. And he reinterpreted gamelan music, because everything in Java was Hindu-Buddhist culture. And Hindu-Buddhist culture is highly symbolic. The colors are symbolic, the numbers are symbolic, everything. The temple is a cosmic mountain. And of course in Malaysia, in Indonesia, you built cosmic mountains as your first mosques, with the 3 roofs. And in fact, in Western India and Kerala, where you have some of the oldest mosques in the Muslim world, they are also cosmic mountains, extremely beautiful, extremely beautiful. And it's said that they were built by Malik ibn Dinar, or that he's the one that authorized them. And in Kerala, if you question that, you will not be invited to dinner. And that's why when they sang Malik ibn Dinar, well, he lived in Basra, and it's easy to go from Basra to Western India, but don't you say a word. Like maybe 100 years after, you're not coming to dinner tonight. Okay, it's Malik ibn Dinar, finished, right? And they have a right to that, that's their culture. But, Kali Jaga spreads Islam through Java, through puppets. And often his stories are not historically authentic. So you have the great confrontation of Imam Hamza with Krishna or Vishnu. Okay, did that really happen? In Java it did. And then they learn everything from that. They learn morality, they learn Islam. We have another example, which is Swahili, the language of the East African Swahiliya, the coastal language, the Bantu coastal language of Swahili, which is a beautiful language. And Swahili has epic poetry. Swahili's filled with poetry. Okay, and one of the great epics of Swahili is Harqali. And Harqali is about, you guessed it, Heraclius. Heraclius, Harqal. And again, we used to sing a song, I do have my roots, forgive me. You probably never sang this song yourself, but it's called the Country Sunday School. And we talked about the Country Sunday School, and you'll hear some Bible stories you never heard before. Adam was the first man that ever was invented. He lived all alone and was quite contented. Oh, okay, and then it goes on, right? So when you go to Harqali, you hear some stories you never heard before. And that's because the whole dynamic of Heraclius, the Byzantine emperor, the Prophet Muhammad, it's cast, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a different light. And what is that light? Somalia, and the Somali tribe structure. And what happens to you when you embrace Islam? Do you lose your tribe or keep your tribe? What happens to your tribal affiliations? This is Africans are extremely tribal people. I don't know any people on earth that are more tribal than Africans. Okay, they are. And so tribe is very important. What happens to the tribe when we come into Islam? So Harqali is about that. And then it's also about something else. That who's shown up on the horizon? Why talk about Byzantium? The Portuguese. The Portuguese are now coming into East Africa, and they are dangerous. And they are destructive. And so this poem is going to protect the Swahili Muslim and non-Muslim from the Portuguese. And one of the ways it will do that is culturally, by showing that Swahilidom is to be cultured. Swahilidom is to have adab. And the Portuguese are not like that. And they're like what? Children. That's the way they'll be spoken of in this incredible epic. The Portuguese are like bad children. They have no adab, they have no understanding. Okay? So this is the way that Islam will be spread in East Africa. And they will sing the epic. They don't just recite it, they sing it. So may Allah enable us to use the asbab and to use them with amana and to put light in people's hearts and to take them out of the darkness. One of my best friends, who's also one of my imams when I came into Islam, although I met him in 1972, I became Muslim in 1970, was Dawood Salah ad-Din, may Allah have mercy on him. He was a jazz genius, and he was a jazz musician. And any music that you put past him, he memorized it the first time he heard it. That's the way he was. And he could have been an actor. He was extremely gifted. He was from Philadelphia, going to Hollywood, and then he stopped in Chicago, and he never left. He never left. He stayed in Chicago, and I had the honor to archive him with Rami Nashashibi before he died. I didn't even know he was sick, but he was. And he died 2 years after that. But he became a Muslim through Dakota Staton, who was one of the greatest jazz musicians. And he knew Dizzy Gillespie, he knew Coltrane, he knew Pharoah Sanders, he knew Yusuf Lateef, he knew all these people. And he can tell you about them. And he told me, he said, look, Dizzy Gillespie was a Muslim. It's just he didn't tell anybody. And he could imitate their voices and everything. But he said that, the jazz musicians, we were Muslims. And he said, maybe we weren't the best Muslims. But he said we were Muslims, and we loved each other. And we loved our people. And we were bringing them off the street. And he even I archived how they would talk. They talk about things like names, like what is your real name? What is your African name? And so he said, and we were controlling jazz. Pharoah Sanders, the creator, has a master plan. And Coltrane, Love Supreme. Some say Allah Supreme. Right? And he said Coltrane was a Muslim too. He knew Coltrane. So he knows a lot more about that than I do. And then he said, and then we were told, and then I asked him, I said, when did things begin to go wrong? And he said, it was when certain groups of Muslims came to us and began to distinguish between good Muslim and bad Muslim. That you're a bad Muslim, you're a good Muslim. And he said that destroyed our community. And it put in power over our community some of the worst people. And of course, we were told never to touch an instrument again. So he said, as soon as we don't play jazz, then who does play jazz? Who takes over then? So these are my opinions. These are not fiqh opinions. And, but we have got to be working. And we've got to get to people's hearts. And I asked Sheikh Khaldun Ahdab. He was my colleague for many years. He's one of the most brilliant Arabs I know. He is a man, you talk about your tongue being behind your intellect. I would ask him questions and he'd just put his head down like this. And it would seem like for ages, and then he would raise his head, and his answer, you could have written it down. and it will be brilliant. He will think it out really carefully. But I asked him at one time, because I needed to know these things, that can we produce films? Which for some of you would be a stupid question, but for me that was a question I had to ask. And he said, you must produce films. Not can you must, but they got to be the highest quality. And he said also cartoons. You've got to produce cartoons, but they've got to be the highest quality. That's what he said. And he is a faqih. He is a muhaddith. And I can put that on him, and he can bear it. So Allah enable us to do the work that needs to be done. I think time is up, isn't it? Allahumma wafiqna lima tuhibbuhu wa tardah, waj'alna min abidika as-su'ada, wa ammitna ala kalimati al-huda, علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم يا رب العالمين اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما آمين آمين. God bless you all. What beautiful nights, Cairo nights, right? And I hope we see each other all the time. Inshallah, year after year, and all of you grow. And it is amazing how you do grow. Because the people I saw last year, it's like I don't recognize them this year. They've grown so much. So inshallah, Allah bless you all. Wassalamu alaikum.